Or thoughts or deal with anything you'd like me to deal with, including what the protests are about or whatever. So the only thing I would ask is if you'd say your name so I can talk to you as a human being rather than as a lecturer and object. Does anybody have a microphone here that is movable away from there? Can you hear me well enough? No, I didn't think that was the case. I could stand where they use controls. Yeah, like I said, I just be back.
Great. Let's just beam it outside.
Maybe I could ask you to come on down closer to the front if you don't mind, and so you can hear me if you wish to. Say your name.
Yeah, my name's Paul.
Paul?
That's a good question that you brought up about what's going on outside. I have no idea. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I've spoken now for about 30 years. I've only had one small protest in the past, so this is a new experience for me. What I understand it to be about is that a group from the Socialist Workers' Party, which usually the Socialist Workers' Party is very much has a feminist perspective that's more Marxist feminist. And the Marxist feminists were the sort of the early beginners of the feminist movement in North America and and also in Europe. And their perspective on the world was that basically the feminist perspective on Marxism was that Marxism was about oppressors, the bourgeoisie oppressing the working class, and the Marxist feminists thought that the males were the oppressor class who were oppressing women. They had designed a system of patriarchy, and the patriarchal system was designed basically by men, for men, to benefit men at the expense of women. And so when they see the work that I'm doing, like I'm trying to form a White House Council for Boys and Men in the United States and chair that commission, and their perspective on that is that the world is made by men for men. There's already top men in top corporate positions, top government positions, and why, therefore, should there be more resources given to men in a world like that? I take a different perspective from that, but so they see me as part of the dominating culture, even though politically I happen to be more liberal than conservative, and an Obama supporter and things like that. But nevertheless, they see that from that perspective, and they see the campus organization, Cafe, that sponsored this from that perspective also, and that's sort of a type of civil war within liberalism at the present moment. And my perspective on that, and you'll see why during the course of this evening, is that when girls and women were having difficulties in the 60s and 70s, I probably was the first major male supporter of the importance of feminism. I was on the board of directors of the National Organization for Women in New York City, spoke all around the world on the importance of women's issues. And because I felt during the late 60s and 70s that women weren't being heard, and when women were speaking up, they were being called things like bra burners and lesbians and so on. And lesbians wasn't an open-minded comment; it was a negative comment in those years. And so so I said, here's my perspective on these issues. This is why we need to be paying attention to women and women's issues. But in the last 20 years or so, I've begun to see things happen to boys and men that you will hear about tonight in a way that will really blow your mind. I mean, you are in for an experience about what's happening with boys and men. The bad news is the crisis is like being aware of the financial crisis 5 years before anybody articulated it. The good news is there's a possibility of having our boys have the type of choice that our girls currently have. I'll explain more about what I mean by that. But if we take the boy crisis and treat it as an opportunity, there's an opportunity for us to do more with boys than ever has had a chance to be done before. But it means a lot of forces working together. There are 12 major causes of the boy crisis that I'll be talking about only some of them tonight. 10 of them have solutions to them. 2 of them, one is peace and the other one is industrialization. Those are causes without solutions that we want. I mean, I'm in favor of peace. I'm in favor of industrialization. So those are things I don't want to solve. But they have created circumstances that have led to problems that we will talk about tonight. So that's a little bit of the answer to your question. Did that respond well enough?
Yeah, although, you know, they've got signs out there saying rape culture.
Yes.
How do they get from trying to have equality for men and women to rape culture?
From their perspective, men are very frequently people who rape, and that men have perpetuated a rape culture that says it's okay for men to rape. I have in the past questioned the degree to which that data was accurate. So when I parsed that data and said, here's the data that's accurate, here's the data that's not accurate, when you overinflate the data, it makes rape appear insignificant and doesn't pay, and that type of thing. So that's to speak as much as I reasonably can on their behalf. That's what they would say.
I see.
That's just one issue over a broad perspective of Mike's work.
Yes, and among the boys' issues, that is a completely irrelevant issue. I will be dealing with sex when we get to the boys' issues, if we have enough time for that. Sounds like that is not me talking to my wife. But it will be. And there are some very serious sexual issues, but they don't have to do with rape. They have to do with how to prevent rape and what the dynamic is in the male-female interaction that makes rape so predictable, and why the video porn that is available is creating a new set of problems and what we can do about that. And basically, I'll be talking with us tonight about how to get our sons to be able to deal with women in their full manifestation as people, rather than having to have more satisfaction from video porn. When you press on the internet and you search for free video porn, not just porn, and not just video porn, but free video porn, the results are 1/4 billion. The implications of that are enormous. Anybody else have any questions? And say your name as people, so I could, again, talk to you as people.
Warren,
yes,
Heidi. Yeah, just your thoughts on what's going on outside. What do you think this is all about? Why is this happening?
Yes, that's the one question I won't answer, because I just answered that question before you walked in.
Okay,
and so
sorry.
I don't want to repeat that to the other group, but I will share later with you.
Okay.
We'll be probably having a bite to eat afterwards. Okay. Anybody else like to ask any questions or make any comments? Say your name.
Conrad.
Conrad? Are you Conrad Bogus? I'm glad to meet you, Conrad.
I might be getting ahead of ourselves here, but what are your thoughts on the recent push towards promoting more participation of women in science and engineering, and why it seems that almost all universities at the same time seeing the same thing? First thing I think is that doesn't this in a way imply certain heteronormative structures at the same time?
Conrad's question is, what do I feel about the push for women to be more involved in science and math and then what they call the STEM professions? And Conrad sort of shared his sort of slant on that by saying, isn't this a bit heteronormative, and should we really be doing this? And my answer is, I feel really good about that. The progress that women have made and helping women into professions that they weren't previously comfortable with. When you give encouragement and you push people beyond, in fact, one of the contributions of fathers to families, and one of the reasons both daughters and sons do so much better when a father is involved, is because a father's contribution to the parenting process is often one of pushing and encouraging people beyond the children beyond their comfort zones. And I think so some girls and women have been pushed beyond their comfort zones, but the way I think overall it's been given, it's been introduced in the last 30, 40 years, largely by the feminist movement, has been to really expose girls and women to user-friendly ways of absorbing and seeing what skills or interests that they have in math. And it turns out that girls and women in North America and much of Europe now are for the first time in history scoring equal to boys in math and science. So the good news is that in an absolute sense, girls and women's scores have come much higher. The bad news is that part of the reason for the equality is that boys and men, boys rather, have gone lower in their scores. We'll see why boys' IQs are dropping. We'll see why boys' maturity level is dropping. This is a multiple causal factor. One of the causes we'll talk about is fatherlessness, but another cause is things that are happening in the environment. Phthalates in rivers that are leaching, plastics in rivers that are leaching phthalates, and the phthalates mimic estrogen. Mimicking of estrogen in the water that we drink speeds up the adolescent process in our daughters, and it slows down the adolescent maturity process in our sons. Therefore, magnifying the gender puberty gap that already has existed for those of us who are older. We know that that's a natural thing, a certain amount of the gender puberty gap, but now it is being artificially exaggerated. That's creating enormous problems for our daughters and our sons having normal heterosexual and straight and gay relationships in schools, but particularly it's a challenge heterosexually because of the gender gap. Does that address your issue? Somebody else had his hand raised over here. Say your name.
Yeah. Al.
Al, right.
During the second debate, Romney and Obama.
No, I was.
One woman asked why women were making 72 cents to a man's dollar. Well, what was your response to the answers given by both the candidates?
Yes, here is why women theoretically appear to be making 72 cents to $1. I wrote a book on this issue, and it's called Why Men Earn More. So, and what the startling truth behind the pay gap and what women can do about it. It is not true that men earn $1 for each 79 cents that women earn for the same work. What is true is that fathers do earn more money in the workplace than mothers do. That is, when you have never married women who have never had children, those women have out-earned males who have never been married and never had children since the 70s. In current day mode, the never married woman who has never had children earns 117% compared to a never married male who has never had children counterpart. That's even when education is controlled for, even numbers of years in the workplace are controlled for. When you have the major controls controlled for, women have out-earned men when they've never been married and never had children. But as soon as men and women get married, something different happens, obviously. Women's focus tends to be they work harder than they've ever worked before, but their work is divided between the workplace and the home place. They want to make sure they have jobs which don't leave them commuting too far. So a higher percentage of women do that. And whereas males, when they have children, they, to the degree that their wife works less, is the degree to which they work more outside of the home, therefore producing more income, therefore producing a gender gap. Now, a certain percentage of these women and men work full-time. Full-time is defined as 35 hours per week or more. So you're comparing with full-time men and full-time women, you're comparing people who work as a cashier for 35 hours a week with a cardiac surgeon. More males on average are cardiac surgeons, more females on average are cashiers. So you're comparing an average that gives you an image of discrimination which doesn't have to do with discrimination. However, as you control for certain variables, it still appears that there's discrimination. So for example, if you have male doctors versus female doctors, there isn't an 80 to $1 gap between the two, but there's still about a 6-7% gap. So that seems like pretty clear discrimination, male doctors versus female doctors. It's only when you take the magnifying glass more closely and you look at the male doctors are more likely, again, to be surgeons. The female doctors are more likely to be general practitioners. And so, but when you take all the surgeons, there's still a 1% or 2% difference between the male earnings and the female earnings. It's only when you take all the surgeons who have been working X number of years or more and compare them to each other and the ones that have in private practice and compare them with each other. When you do all the comparison of those types of variables, and what I looked at in Why Men Earn More is 25 of those variables, they all lead to two things happening. Each choice that the average male makes, this is the statistically average male, leads to him on average making more money. But all the choices that women make statistically on average lead her to having a more balanced life between the workplace and the home place. When women get to be, now let's look at the glass ceiling aspect of this. When women get to be earn about $100,000 a year, depending on where you live, economically it's between 75 and about 110,000 a year. Women make a different decision about their life. They basically say, I'm earning enough money to handle survival. In order to have a balanced life, what I want is time with my children, time with myself, time with my husband, time that's for spiritual activities, time for exercise, and alone time. And I want that balanced with my workplace time. Now, not every woman makes that decision, but many more women make that type of balanced life decision. So when I worked with I did some consulting for British Petroleum, trying to get their females to become executives. Once the women moved to that level, a high percentage of them said, it's not worth it for me to be making an extra $50,000 and give up all those things I really care about in life. As Hillary Clinton said last week, I want to take a few years off because I want to do things that make life worth living. So I believe that men should be learning from women. I think a balanced life is the purpose of work, that achieving money, earning money that somebody else spends while we die sooner is the traditional male's definition of power, and it is a definition of power which, if I tried to sell it to any group of women, every woman in that group would be intelligent enough to say, get out of this room, that is not what we consider power. So what I'm talking about in The Myth of Male Power, which is the book that has angered so many of the women out there, is redefining power as control over one's life. Question, do we have the police been able to get the people through the barriers? And do we have the audience that...
Andrew, what's the status with the police outside?
Trying to move them all to the back.
Oh, they're out at the back? What about the front?
All the back and try to get to the front because the doors are going to get...
So, it's coming.
So Andrew, are the people that could be in here, that want to be in here, are they here or are they about to...
They're still some of them.
Still out, so there. So what is your decision or the group's decision as to when I should start, or when we should start? Should we start now? Yes. Okay. We're energizing the powers that be here. In the meantime, I'm very happy to answer more questions. Say your name.
Hi, Matt.
Matt.
Yes, I actually have a question. With respect to our legal system, whether you look at criminal law or family law or any sort of things that deals with genders, I mean, here in Canada, we're not that different from the typical issues that you see when it comes to genders in the States.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're looking at the same crime but not equal sentences, or you're looking at a family court where there's a divorce proceedings and children and custody issues. What's your take on it? Do you think that's just our system or our legal system is more sympathetic to female gender, or is there a reason there's more to it than just that?
Yeah, there is much more to it than that. Yes, sorry.
8 o'clock start time. They're maneuvering them away from the front door, so just give them about 15 minutes.
Okay. The answer to the question about timing is they're going to do 8 o'clock start time. I'm very sorry for what has happened tonight around these issues. So the answer to that question is that you want the deeper answer? Should I take the time to go to the deeper answer? Okay, the deeper answer is that every society that has survived based on its ability to train its sons to be disposable. Disposable in work, disposable in war. That's the male side of the coin. And so we have an investment in training our males to be disposable. We have an investment in having a firefighter. We have an investment in having a police officer. When Hitler was potentially invading North America, we could have had that happen. We had an investment in having our sons be able to think of it as masculine to go to war without question. And so when you have an investment in somebody being disposable, it's hard to have as much feeling for the loss of that person as it is for somebody that you want to cherish and protect. And so the job of men throughout history has been the job not only of protecting the country, but also of being willing to risk their lives and to sacrifice their lives on behalf of women. So a gentleman in the 1900s was a person who carried a sword and who had developed a reputation of being willing to defend to the death even an insult to his fiancée. Women were property, but men were expected to risk their lives and die in order to save their property. And so the bad news was that women were property. The good news, the other bad news, was that there was another side of that coin about the disposability of males. So when males are arrested, and when men who were trained this way, when the family needed money, it was more likely that a man would rob the bank. When there was a need for things to be done that to protect and to kill, men were more likely to do that killing. And so we all started, in every culture, there was a feeling that men were not only more disposable, but you were more angry at men. And so when men and women are both asked, which is more important, the death of a man or the death of a woman, even though it's put in such equal terms, both females and males say in surveys all over the U.S., all over North America, that the death of a female is worse than the death of a male. And that happens on the stabbing level and so on. And so we are not in their psyches. So now how does that translate in terms of arrest data? So when a man, aside from the crime of rape, which is not comparable on female and male, in every crime, males get greater sentences for the equivalent crime. Now that in gender studies areas, they say that's not true, that women get longer periods of probation. That is true, that women get longer periods of probation. They get longer periods of probation and fewer years in prison for the same crime. So that's sort of, and now in the area where it's worse and the greatest amount of damage is done is in the area of parenting. What is really crucial to children of divorce is that there is the involvement of three. If you want a child of divorce to do well, there are three things that are crucial. One is that there's be about an equal amount of time with mom and dad. Number two is that the father and mother live close enough to each other so that the children don't have to choose between seeing the other parent and being with the other children, being with activities, being involved with birthdays. And number three is that there be no bad mouthing that the child can detect by the father toward the mother or by the mother toward the father. If you have those three conditions, equal parenting, closeness to each other geographically, and the involvement of a small amount of bad mouthing, children do reasonably well. Not as well as in the intact family, but almost as well as they would in the intact family. The courts are most deficient there. The average judge will say that she or he is in favor of parents having an equal amount of time with the children, but that when the parents are in conflict, they don't feel that shared parenting will work, and then they tend to give the bias in favor of the mother. And that's where that's the crucial area where the courts have really failed us, and we need to speak up and understand and change that in the court system. Did that respond to your question, Matt? Yes. You're welcome. Say your name. Faith.
I don't want the criticisms of your articulate feminists is that there is an extent of the importance of race in feminist writing. Do you think that that's changing, and do you think that that's an important thing to consider?
Yeah, I think that the importance of race is an important discussion. I think we've done a relatively good job in the last 30 years of highlighting the importance of race. That's why it's part of our consciousness. But the great majority of boys that are having problems are African American boys, and those are boys without and that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of white boys, Caucasian boys. It's not so bad in the Asian community, but that is changing quickly in the Asian community, and it's also a problem in the Hispanic community. So, and it does have different slices in each community, but there's something common in all communities that boys have in common, and that's what hasn't been investigated yet. So let me do two things on that. As I go through the presentation, if there's a racial component that you feel that I'm missing that is more unique to one than the other, help me with that and point that out to me. I'd like to sort of be tuned into that. Having said that, it is what is happening with African American boys. I mean, if you want to look at a group of people in North America who are having significant problems, it is more than any other group of people, the African American male. And so why is that? To a larger degree than any other single issues, there's many issues there that are race related, but to a larger degree than any other single issue, it's the absence of the father. When the father is involved in an African American male family, the statistics are significantly different. So in a poor area, which is oftentimes in inner cities African American dominated, the achievement of boys in school is about the same as it is when there is a father involved, as it is in a wealthy area where there is no father involved. So the importance of wealth and the importance of the effect of poverty is as strong as the effect of father involvement, or vice versa. The effect of father involvement is as strong as the effect of poverty. However, when it comes to drug use, the effect of fathers is more important than the effect of money. And so those are just a few slices of the data on that. But if you are doing work in the area of race and you have dimensions of it that are magnified that can therefore be focused on, then I'd love to hear more about that, Faith. And would you also bring up stuff at the end too? Is that okay?
I'm just wondering if you knew. I don't know.
Oh yes, okay, I got you. I understand. I don't want to put you on the spot on that issue. You say your name? Alex?
You mentioned that there were surveys done and that populations do not find such a man.
Yeah.
Could you elaborate more on that? Because it's very odd to me.
Absolutely. The precise data on that is in Father and Child, I'm sorry, not Father and Child Reunion, a book called The Myth of Male Power. I sort of updated that data in a book called Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say. I don't remember the exact sources of it, but it's, as I recall, I think it's an extrapolation from Census Bureau data, and then they did some type of subset survey of the Census Bureau population of that. But I could be wrong about that. But the footnotes for that are in one of those two books. I believe it's both of the books with it more updated in the Women Can't Hear What Men Don't Say book. Let's see, Heidi.
Warren, one of the things that I have come across recently is this increase, this massive increase in suicides by U.S. veterans who are coming home, sometimes to an empty home. Mm-hmm. The divorce rate, my understanding in male veterans from having been deployed to either Afghanistan or Iraq, the divorce rate is skyrocketed, and that the fathers are coming home to an empty home. Sometimes there's a posting on the door that says that they're in arrears for a huge amount of child support. Mm-hmm. I know that with veterans there's some issue in terms of getting their benefits once they return from a mission mm-hmm. or from deployment. Do you have any data to kind of substantiate the things that I've been seeing online? Yes,
the answer. So, did you hear Heidi's trying to repeat Heidi's question? Her question is, what's happening with veterans? And she's been hearing a lot about suicide in veterans and oftentimes divorce rates being enormously high among veterans. And she wanted to know, is that true or not true? And the answer to that question is, it's true, but it's much worse than you know. Meaning that we now do know, as a result of a CBS investigation, that was rejected by the Defense Department for 3 or 4 years before they finally admitted that the CBS investigation was accurate, was saying that there was many boys who committed suicide after they came back from Iraq or Afghanistan, as were killed in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And that has been verified. That is true. The big, secondly, are there divorces? How many of you have seen the series Homeland? There's a series on Showtime called Homeland, which is really actually a very, very good series. And it's very good on this issue of taking a man that was in Iraq and what happened to him in Iraq mentally, and how he came home just a different person. And so if we really, I was talking a moment ago to Matt's question about boys being disposable, and there's no better example of disposability than not only sending mostly males over to war, but the important thing is not caring about them when they come back. Every single thing that you learn to be an effective warrior is inversely related to every single thing that you learn to be effective to love your family. There are, I said every single thing, that's not quite true. A very high percentage of things that you learn. In order to be an effective warrior, you have to objectify, you have to disconnect from your feelings. All of those things are extremely important if you're to survive as a warrior. They're extremely important to not have dominate your life. If you are to survive, if you are to be effective in communicating in marriage and to communicating with your children. The process that it takes to learn to succeed in war is inversely related as a rule to the process it takes to succeed in love. So if we don't give, especially boys who go into combat and girls who go into combat, if we do not give our combat veterans in particular at least as much counseling for free when they come back, not just individual counseling, but marriage counseling, not just marriage counseling, but family counseling, we are undermining our families and disrespecting the contribution that we make. We're erecting monuments, but forgetting about the real monument, which is that everybody is working for, which is our respect for love. I'm sensing that people are coming back in now. Are we ready to start the program? Where
I think so.
Okay. Well, I must apologize tonight for all of you being held up in various ways. And thank you for the dedication that allows you to come nevertheless and stay as long as you have stayed. You have been waiting an hour already. My experience, especially working with boys, is that those of us that are male don't sit well for a long period of time just listening to PowerPoint presentations. So I'm going to ask you all just to stand up if you would. Yeah. And I'll ask you to turn to the right. Just turn to the right, face this wall here. And to reach out your arms and put them on the shoulders of the person in front of you and give her or him, that's it, move across the aisles. There we go. In the United States, we're trying to move across the aisles, so you can do it here in Canada as well. When you bring somebody in from California, this is what happens. So I'll ask you to, Sandra, John, you can touch each other. It's not a crime. Reach out and massage the shoulders of the person in front of you. The person whose shoulders are being massaged, tell the person behind you, oh, this is really nice. Forget about this lecture. Tell the person behind you whether you'd like it harder or softer. Come on, don't get dirty on me. Turn around and massage the person who's been massaging you. Okay, give yourselves a big hand. Thank you.
That's so California. People outside need to
So, California. Before I start, I want to thank so much Cafe and the board of Cafe that has been devoted so much time and energy to creating tonight, particularly Ian and Conrad Bogus and so many of the other people who have been worked so hard on this. So let me start. Is there really a boy crisis? Yes or no? And basically the era in which our sons are growing up now is basically an era that has been labeled for us. It's been labeled for us by a book called The End of Men and the Rise of Women, which evolved from an Atlantic article on that topic. Obviously, if young men today are looking to the future and they see the end of men as their future, that doesn't really give you a lot of inspiration for life's journey. If the female students that are here are looking at the end of men as their future, I'd suggest maybe you take advantage of these guys now. A prediction of the end of men is, I think, far-fetched. But here's what parents and teachers throughout the industrialized world are reporting, and as you'll hear from me in a moment, this is a problem in all of the 30-some-odd industrialized nations for reasons I'll get into in a moment. They're reporting that there's a high percentage of sensitive boys that have basically sweet souls. Many of them are also quite creative, that are nevertheless underachieving, that don't seem to care about achievement. They're dropping out of school. They're being addicted to video games or porn. They have problems with ADD or ADHD. They're often dependent on street drugs, prescription drugs, or highs in the form of risk-taking games. They're collecting social support from unmet friends who are somehow not available when they move, but yet they call them friends. That's the definition of a friendship, who will help you when you move. There are boys searching for role models of masculinity, not in their dads, but in gangs or in the military. As young men, our sons are increasingly unemployed or underemployed. They're unable to commit to a partner or to parenting. They're financially supported by their parents to a greater degree than they've ever been before, or they're being paid for by taxpayer money in prison. They're committing suicide, we'll see in a few moments how and why, at 5 times the rate of their sisters. In brief, parents and teachers are seeing in many men a lack of motivation, a failure to launch, or, in fact, little inspiration for life's journey. The consequences, let's put it this way. Who are the most high-achieving inventors and CEOs in the world? To a large degree, males. Who are the most likely to be in prison or be serial killers? To a large degree, males. Young men who have a sense of purpose become one of society's most constructive forces. Young men who have no sense of purpose become one of society's most what forces? Destructive forces. Before I take a look at a few of the examples from North America, let's be clear about the issue of why this is in the industrialized world and how this is manifesting in different parts of the industrialized world. In China, they have a phrase now, yin sheng yang shui, which means the female is on the way up, the male is on the way down. How does this affect Chinese male-female dynamics? When you look at the person who founded the largest website, the dating site in China, she says, well, our women on our website are multiplying their demands for what they want from males. So women who are dating have an increased amount of demands than what they want from males. That increased demand is focused on they still want a man to be taller, they still want a man to have a good salary, they still want a man to own his own car and own his own home. But of the people who joined the Beijing part of the Chinese website, only 12% of the men using the site own their own home. So almost all the women on the website are trying to choose from this 12%. The 12% that own their own home, plus the portion of that 12% who are tall, who are cute, who are employed, who have a high-paying job. So you're having young women's requirements are increasing at exactly the same time that young men's willingness to fulfill the requirements that women want are decreasing. Does that appear like it might be a relationship problem? I think so. In Japan, the new word for boys, for many boys, is herbivores. Herbivores are described as boys who spend as much on cosmetics and clothes as women. One company in Japan rather, called Wish Room, has sold more than 5,000 bras to boys. The herbivore is usually characterized as being a parasite single who typically lives with his parents. He's very close, especially close to which parent? Mom or dad? Mom, much more likely to be mom. The herbivore is typically apathetic about careers, dating, sex, and marriage. Now, is this a real exception to the rule, like a little slice of Japan? A government survey sponsored by the Japan Family Planning Association that was done in 2010 asked boys about their interest in sex. 36% of 16 to 19-year-old boys expressed no interest in sex or despised sex. That has doubled in the last 2 years, between 2008 and 2010. It is twice in 2010 what it was in 2008. However, 59% of women aged 16 to 19 said that they were uninterested in or averse to sex. Only a 12% increase from 2008. So the real difference from the past? In the past, women were less interested in sex than men as a rule. But men were interested enough to pursue. Now, fewer men do pursue, and women are rarely interested in sex with a passive man. Has this happened in Japan previously? Yes. In the period 1603 to 1868, called the Tokugawa period in Japan, men played women, dressed as women in the theater. They did erotic art based on bisexualism and transgender gender role-playing. What happened in that period in Japan? The common element between the Tokugawa period and today is peace. Boys didn't have to prepare themselves for their core role of responsibility in war. When boys don't have a core role to define themselves as men, we need to find another role for them to give them a sense of purpose, or things start happening that don't produce good family relationships and good male-female relationships. The status of boys is in jeopardy in all 35 of what type of countries? The most developed countries. What do the most developed countries have in common? Industrialization. What is there about industrialization? Industrialization enables enough mastery of survival skills so that you don't have to develop gender-based survival skills. Men work outside the home, women work inside the home. So ironically, the traditional male role, captain of industry, is succeeding to make the traditional male role obsolete. So what we're going to be talking about today is 12 causes of the boy crisis. 2 of them we just dealt with for a moment, industrialization and peace. Those are causes that I don't want to have solutions for. I want industrialization, I want peace. But the other 10 causes of the boy crisis are causes that are major problems for which we do have solutions. So I'll deal with that, excuse me. So let me start with a graph. Let's look at North America, for example. In Canada, 66% of the high school dropouts are male. In the U.S., for the first time in U.S. history, boys will have less education than their dads. Notice that in Canada, right here, Canada is only slightly behind the United States on that issue. In Canada, men were 62% of Canada's undergrads in 1970. Women are 62% of undergrads in Canada today. As I mentioned before, I'm happy about women's progress. We'll see why I'm not so happy about what's happening with boys. In the United States, there's the same phenomenon with college degrees. I'm sorry. And in the United States with college degrees, you look at the female versus the male difference. Up here, you see in 1970 it was 61%. Today it's projected that there'll be 39%. It used to be 39% females, projected that it will be 61%. In Canada, 13% of male elementary teachers in Ontario. So one solution is the possibility of bringing elementary school teachers into the classroom who are male to be good role models for young boys. However, 13% of the male elementary school teachers in Ontario report being wrongly accused of inappropriate contact with pupils. As one of the teachers said, all it takes is one parent or fellow teacher to perceive that the line between nurturing and pedophilia is blurry, and I'm a dead duck. Male teachers report that they work in a constant state of anxiety, particularly if they're expressive, particularly if they reach out, particularly if they're the type of male teachers that we want our children to be exposed to. Boys' IQs. So we often say, well, is it just a relative problem relative to girls or women? Or is it just that girls are doing better and boys are not doing quite as much better as quickly? The answer is no. Here's some examples as to why. Recent studies show that IQ is not fixed. It usually increases with each generation. However, something is happening. Instead of increasing, boys' IQs have dropped about 15 points since the 1980s. Boys who are nearly 12 years old today are doing only as well as the 8 to 9-year-olds in the 70s. Let's look at mental health. Suicide. At age 9, before the male role becomes apparent to most boys, and before puberty sets in, girls and boys commit a suicide rate of the same. From 10 to 14, boys' suicide rate becomes twice as high as girls. From 15 to 19, 4 times as high. From 20 to 24, more than 5 times as high. When we look at suicide in the military, you heard me say during the question and answer period before the program, for the reasons we all know about, there were more U.S. military killed by suicide in 1 year than there were killed in the war in Iraq and Afghanistan in all the years combined. Let's look at physical health for a minute. In 1920, American boys and men lived just 1 year less than women. Today, American boys and men live 5 fewer years. In just 90 years, the male-female life expectancy gap has grown 400%. Males' deaths in war and females' deaths in childbirth have both been reduced by about an equal amount. Boys today have sperm counts less than half of what their grandfathers had at their age. Let's look at the overall set causes. I'm not going to be able to deal with all these causes and solutions tonight, but I'll give you a sense of the overview of what the 10 causes are that do have solutions that should be addressed. One is plastics and phthalates' effect on the gender puberty gap. I will deal with that. Number 2 is video game addiction's impact on the male brain. We all know about video game addiction. We don't know usually about the impact on the male brain. Number 3 is the era of the multi-option woman and the no-option man. Number 4 is fatherlessness. Number 5, and possibly the most important and revolutionary, is understanding the heritage of males as disposable. Number 6 is porn addiction. Number 7 is our sexual attitudes. Number 8, the feminization of education. Number 9, medications as responsibility avoidance. Number 10, careers. Careers are evolving from muscle-focused to mental, from making a killing to making life balanced. Men are out of tune to the new area where careers are going to. Let's look at the first cause, plastic and flate's effect on the gender puberty gap. As the people who were here before the presentation heard me say briefly, plastics leach phthalates. Phthalates mimic the action of only female sex hormones. Hence the high level of female sex hormones and the shriveled testicles of alligators in Lake Apopka in Florida outside of Disneyland. Hence male smallmouth bass swimming in the rivers of Virginia, Maryland, and DC are making eggs, not sperm. Looking at the gender puberty gap more carefully, these phthalates appear to not just be making boys reach puberty at an older age, but also to be making girls reach puberty at a young age, creating, therefore, the gender puberty gap. In DC, the Washington Post reports that there are increasing numbers of young men attending DC area universities that are losing interest in sex or being found to be impotent. My comment about that is no comment. Of course, the solution for starters includes cleaning up our environment. So people who are into environmental work here really have a contribution that goes beyond the way environmental work is introduced to us at the universities. A second cause is video games addictions on the impact on the male brain. Note that the problem is not video games. The problem is addiction to video games. A lot of research shows that video games in small doses can be extremely useful in many dimensions of skill development. Teenage boys, though, use video games an average of more than 13 hours per week. Teenage girls use them about 5 hours per week. And this does not include the viewing of pornography or watching sports on a mobile device or other uses of technology. Playing video games engorges the nucleus accumbens. Here's the problem with video games when done too much. Playing video games engorges the nucleus accumbens portion of the brain with blood, motivating the boy to win at the game. But it doesn't motivate him to win at life. Why? Because it shuts off the blood flow to the part of the brain, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, that is responsible for translating what motivation into goals that are usable in the real world. We actually have a part of our brain that translates motivation into real life accomplishments as opposed to just winning in a game accomplishment. So if you look at the yellow portion here of this, you'll see the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. And that is there, weak yellow. And then obviously here is the nucleus accumbens part of the brain. The more time a child spends playing video games, once it moves past a certain point, the worse the child does in school, from elementary school to college. Again, this is not true at the very low levels. It is true when it starts getting more than 10 hours per week. By age 21, boys average 14,000 hours of gaming. It takes only about a third of that time to get a bachelor's degree. A third cause is the era of the multi-option woman and the no-option man. In the past, mothers learned to row the family boat only from the right side, raising children. Fathers learned to row it only from the left side, raising money. Today, mothers can row from both sides, but fathers still get the most respect when they row from the left, raising money, as we saw with the China type of study. The problem, if a mom wants to row from the left and a dad can only row from the left, the boat, the family boat, goes in circles. In the future, because advanced technologies are making economic change the only constant, we're increasing the need for a family boat that has flexibility, with fathers eventually being able to raise children as comfortably as moms now raise money. This doesn't seem to be relevant if we haven't had children, but once we've had children, it becomes too late to prepare for that. Here's what often happens. If a guy is reasonably successful at work and his wife becomes pregnant, they are likely to discuss three options for her. A married mother's three options, if her husband is reasonably successful, is work full-time, children full-time, or some combination of both. The successful married guy also, though, considers three slightly different options. A married father's three options are option 1, work full-time, option 2, work full-time, and option 3, work full-time. Or more precisely, if the guy is successful, his option 3 is work overtime. If he's not successful, it's often work what? Two jobs, exactly. The popular media would have us think it's different today, quoting statistics such as 40% of married working mothers out-earn their husbands. But that's a tricky statistic because the real truth is, the trick is in the word working. 40% of mothers with children 5 or under do not work outside the home, and additional 20% work part-time. So we're really talking about less than 20% of married mothers out-earning their husbands. Nevertheless, this is obviously a huge shift from what it used to be. And in the meantime, though, here's what many guys experience. So we just looked at that one option, work full-time. Let me go more deeply into that one option to get into the male experience of being married with children. Option 1 of option 1 is if he fails to work full-time, he feels like a failure. Option 2 of the one option he has is if he succeeds at working full-time, but fails to out-earn his wife, he often feels like a failure, not just by his own evaluation, but often by the emotional and the body language cues, and sometimes her greater likelihood or desire to divorce, if she doesn't believe that will change. Option 3 of one option, if he's the sole breadwinner, he may be caught what I call the father's catch-22, and he feels like a failure as a dad. So what do I mean by if he's a sole breadwinner, he's a failure as a dad, he's caught in the father's catch-22? Basically, the father's catch-22 is that the more successful he is at work, the less likely he is to be successful at love. For example, he'll be more successful as an attorney if he finds fault with what another attorney is saying, but less successful in love if he finds fault with what his wife is saying. Not if he occasionally finds fault, but if he reflexively finds fault, which really good attorneys learn to do very well. The father's catch-22 is that dads learn to love their family by being away from the love of their family. The more successful the dad is, the more likely he is to be away from the love of his family in order to get the love of his family. One solution is socializing the next generation to respect young men who are full-time dads. Another solution is respecting young men who are human beings, not human doings. I'll get to that later. Fourth cause, fatherlessness. The desire to be a father starts with the son, who sees in his own dad who he could become. Boys will not be inspired to pursue the option of being a great father in a culture of father absence. Yet we've become exactly that, a culture of father absence. 1 out of every 3 children in America lives in a father-absent home. That's 24 U.S. children living without a dad. Even more startling is the trend. For the first time in U.S. history, more than 50% of children born to mothers under 30 were born outside of marriage. Almost two-thirds of children in the United States are born to mothers under 30. So we look at this from a graph perspective. If you take a look at this line on the graph, you see women under 30, the amount of increase in non-marital births versus all women are also going up in the same basic direction. The red line indicating births to women under 30 shows that 53% are not non-marital. The problem with that is usually that means minimal or no father involvement. What a boy misses when he misses his dad is conveyed best on an emotional level, I think, by Daniel Beatty in this video here that I'll show, a quick little thing here that I'll show you. Oopsie daisy. What did I do here? All right. And I need your help to get this. This has to point right together. Very good. Let's just click on that if you would. That's it.
As a boy, I shared a game with my father. Played it every morning till I was 3. He would knock on my door and I'd pretend to be asleep till he got right next to the bed. Then I would get up and jump into his arms. Good morning, Papa. And my papa, he would tell me that he loved me. We shared a game. Knock, knock. Until that day when the knock never came. And my mama takes me on a ride past cornfields on this never-ending highway till we reach a place of high, rusty gates. A confused little boy, I enter the building carried in my mama's arms. Knock, knock. We reach a room of windows and brown faces. Behind one of the windows sits my father. I jump out of my mama's arms and run joyously towards my papa's, only to be confronted by this window. I knock, knock, trying to break through the glass, trying to get to my father. I knock, knock as my mama pulls me away before my papa even says a word. And for years he has never said a word. And so 25 years later I'll write these words for the little boy in me who still awaits his papa's knock. Papa, come home because I miss you. Miss you waking me up in the morning and telling me you love me. Papa, come home because there's things I don't know and I thought maybe you could teach me. How to shave, how to dribble a ball, how to talk to a lady, how to walk like a man. Papa, come home because I decided a while back I want to be just like you. But I'm forgetting who you are. And 25 years later, a little boy cries, and so I write these words and try to heal and try to father myself. And I dream of a father who says the words my father did not, dear son. I'm sorry I never came home. For every lesson I failed to teach, hear these words. Shave in one direction with strong delivered strokes to avoid irritation. Dribble the page with the brilliance of your ballpoint pen. Walk like a god and your goddess will come to you. No longer will I be there to knock on your doors. You must learn to knock for yourself. Knock, knock down doors of racism and poverty that I could not. Knock, knock on doors of opportunity for the lost brilliance of the black men who crowd these cells. Knock, knock with diligence for the sake of your children. Knock, knock for me, for as long as you are free, these prison gates cannot contain my spirit. The best of me still lives in you. Knock, knock with the knowledge that you are my son, but you are not my choices. Yes, we are our father's sons and daughters, but we are not their choices. But despite their absences, we are still here, still alive, still breathing, with the power to change this world, one little boy and girl at a time. Knock, knock, who's there? We are.
Just to clarify, that was not me speaking. Anybody with any technical knowledge know how to take care of that little buzz? Okay, I'll continue on here where I'm getting help that I'm not very good at. Let's look at the fifth cause. I mentioned before that the most important thing I'll be sharing this evening is our understanding of masculinity as disposability. Oliver Wendell Holmes said it before I did, which is that every society rests on the death of men. I put it this way: Virtually every society that survived did so by preparing its sons to be disposable. Disposable in war, disposable at work. And because many of our sons who die in war or work are dads, also unconsciously disposable as dads. In the past, we used to praise our sons as heroes if they did what was healthy for society's survival, such as risking their lives to defend us against a Hitler. We also raise our sons to consider themselves real men if what they did for survival was helping their immediate family, such as bringing home a paycheck, risking their lives in the coal mine, risking their lives in the World Trade Center. However, traditional masculinity was designed to socialize a boy to become a man by contributing to his society's health by risking his own health. Notice that paradox there and that tension. That traditional masculinity was designed to socialize a boy to become a man by contributing to his society's health by risking his own health. Dead heroes don't tend to be that healthy. A boy became a man by also contributing to his family's health by risking his own health. Because his family was a source of love, he learned to associate women's willingness to love him with his willingness to be disposable. So consider the definition of a hero. Etymologically, the word hero derives from the word sero, S-E-R-O-W, from which we get our word servant, think public servant, and also from a different etymological root, our word slave and our word protector. That's basically what a hero is, a servant and a slave whose function is to protect. Since all humans are social animals, calling boys heroes can be thought of as a social bribe to risk death so the rest of us may live. There is a hub of the male brain that's especially responsive to social approval. It's actually also in the female brain as well. It's called the RCZ, the rostral cingulate zone. Here's a brain image. Here's the location of the rostral cingulate zone in our brain. At an early age, our sons sense a respect, for example, for volunteer firefighters. Do you have in Canada also volunteer firefighters? Yeah, okay. Thus, in the United States, 76% of U.S. firefighters are volunteers. Ah, I was putting this on the little thing that was triggering the phone. So you'll see, I am very good at mechanics when I don't think about it. Now you stay untapped. So let's see. 76% of American firefighters are volunteers. That's almost 100% of volunteer firefighters are males. Their pay, what is the pay of the volunteer firefighter?
No idea.
Nothing, right? No, actually, two things. Praise and respect. Think of praise and respect for a moment as a possible social bribe triggering the RCZ, the rostral cingulate zone, for boys to protect us by not protecting themselves. I could do a whole lecture here on what happens to the bodies of firefighters, but that would just be one little example of the hazardous job occupations that we talked about a little bit before. If all parents wish to protect their children, isn't protection a no-brainer? Not with our sons. With our sons, we face a risk versus protection dilemma, an internal conflict between encouraging our sons to take risks and the instinct to protect our sons. Do we really encourage our sons to risk their lives even today? Well, let's look at some of the message we send them. We cheer for our sons to win at the sports most likely to create serious injury: ice hockey, football, Ultimate Fighting Championships, WWE Wrestling, rodeos, NASCAR, boxing, kickboxing. I remember watching with some of my friends in college a football bowl game on TV, and one of the commentators was saying, this quarterback has such courage, he's throwing with a dislocated shoulder. Every single one of my male friends, all of whom tended to be more liberal and open-minded than most males, all unanimously nodded in transfixed agreement that this guy was a real hero. There was no questioning of this process. What message do our sons receive when our response to an unpaid boy in college playing quarterback with a dislocated shoulder is to call it courage rather than expecting the coach to call a doctor? And then we wonder why our boys who become men refuse to call a doctor? Who teaches this to boys? Only the two most important forces in a boy's life, parents and cheerleaders. Parents are still cheering in the United States. They go, football games, they go, cheerleaders go, 1st and 10, do it again, 1st and 10, do it again. So what are they cheering the boys to do? They're cheering the boys to, I like that, they're cheering the boys to do what? To risk dislocated shoulders, spinal cord injuries, concussions. Only now, for the first time in U.S. history, are concussions even allowed to be talked about in relation to football. So the cheerleaders cheering 1st and 10, do it again, are not cheering what they might cheer, which is, the cheerleaders do not tend to be looking out and saying, gee, I noticed that football player, risking his life. I noticed really the way he's really listening to the other football players. I noticed his sensitive, sweet smile. I noticed his caring, tender work. When he is caring, tender, and doesn't hit hard enough, he loses his position on the team. When he loses his position on the team, for whom do the cheerleaders cheer? They cheer for his replaceable part. Another number 7 that takes over. So even today, we teach boys to unconsciously associate being abused with being loved. We do this collectively. The girl cheerleader is more likely to support him, more likely to love him. Other boys are more likely to support him and respect him. Parents and teachers support this. All our taxpayers support this. At what age do our sons learn to associate being abused with being loved? Prior to the age of consent. In the United States, we have Pop Warner football. Do you have that here? No, it's... At what age do boys tend to start developing here respect for the ice hockey player that might be a little bit more violent than in a boxing match? About 2 or 3 years of age.
Your football is our hockey.
Yes, our football is your hockey. A culture that believes men are disposable will honor their disposability with monuments, but not care for them once they've served their purpose. That's the litmus test to seeing whether we really believe in our boys' disposability. Are we doing this today? I mentioned before how the suicide rate of American soldiers returning from Iraq and Afghanistan exceeds the death rate in all the wars combined. Yet in Afghanistan, there is only one mental health provider for every 1,123 soldiers. Okay, that was the foreplay. Do we have time for sex? A sixth cause is porn addiction. Most people get the profound impact of the availability of sex without marriage, but few people, I find, get the profound impact of the 24/7 immediate availability of pornography without marriage, and without love, and without cost, and well, without women. Throughout history, here was the basic marital deal. The basic marital deal was that in exchange for one act of sex, a man was required to commit to paying for a woman for a lifetime. That was the basic marital deal throughout most of history in all societies that needed food and water to survive. Women who gave sex away without getting that commitment in most societies were called cheap. Homosexuals who didn't take responsibility to be fruitful and multiply in exchange for sex were ostracized. Masturbation, sex for free, was taboo. Pornography might be defined as access to a wide variety of attractive women without fear of rejection at a price he can afford. The real issue throughout almost all cultures about sex was not that sex was about immorality, but that it was about immortality. We couldn't survive without keeping it in short supply. Sex for free was like the OPEC nations giving away oil for free. It would cheapen the price. When most dads were adolescents, pornography was removed from easy access on the newsstands and even sealed in plastic wrap. Today, in exchange for typing free porn videos, as I mentioned before, into Google, a guy receives search results of about 250 million results just by typing free porn videos into Google. No plastic wrap, and these women move. Does this mean we need to keep pornography from our sons? No. Pornography can be an aid to sexual release, but it's better to have a sexual release with Miss June than to pressure a real life woman to have pressure a real life woman just so a guy can have sexual release. To some parents, none of this seems to fit reality for their son and his iPhone. They often say, some parents will say to me, well, gee, girls are calling my son. Aren't girls taking initiatives a lot more than they used to? The answer is yes, but. Few parents understand why, if sex is so free and easy, their sons are finding pornography so appealing. Sex today appears to involve much less rejection, much less complexity, and many fewer pressures, or so it would appear. Let's take a look at the last cause of the cause that I'll be dealing with in the presentation. And that seventh cause is our sexual attitudes. And that will throw light on the reasons that pornography is such a problem. Have men and women's attitudes toward their sexuality evolved so that today they're fairly similar? Take a guess. To get a clue, a PR agency's 2012 survey of almost 500,000 online subscribers asked the following question. Assume you are a virgin and you decided to sell your virginity. What realistically would be your asking price? I'm sure that some people said, in no way, no price, I wouldn't sell it. But of those who finally settled on a price, take a guess for a moment about whether there was a gap between the prices asked by men or asked by women to sell their virginity. And if so, how big was the gap? And remember, which direction was the gap? Did men want more for their virginity than women? Remember, we hear a great deal of the claims that about women getting lower wages in part because they don't ask for enough. So is this women not asking for enough for their virginity in relation to what men would ask for? So how many feel that probably the men asked for more for their virginity than the women did? Okay. One. How many feel that the women asked for more? How many would say that it's about 2-to-1 ratio, somewhere in that area? How many would say it's maybe higher than a 10-to-1 ratio? How many would say it's higher than a 100-to-1 ratio? How many would say it's higher than a 1,000-to-1 ratio? Okay, let's look. The average female answer was 10 million for the virginity. The average male answer was what?
$2.
$2. I'll pay to give it away. We are cheap. The average male answer is...
Wow.
So, for those of you that do math pretty well, in brief, in 2012, women value their virginity at 10,000 times the value of men's self-assessed value. In percentage terms, that would be a 900,000% gap. That is a 900,000% gap between the sexual self-worth of a man and a woman. Keeping this in mind, in a minute I'll be going to an audience participation. I was planning to do an audience participation exercise, not exactly around that, but to illustrate some of the tensions between men and women, but because of the time tonight, I'm not going to have a chance to get into that. But let's take a look at something that I think you'll really enjoy. I know you'll really enjoy this. All right, I need the text help again. We need volume.
Fantastic. I bet you're going to be a great teacher.
I'm sorry. Did you just look at my chest?
Yeah.
Can I go to one yoga class without being completely oogled by some jerk?
Hold on just a second here. Can I say something really quickly?
Oh, now you're asking for permission. Please.
If you really didn't want me to stare at your beautiful breasts, you'd be wearing something other than a purple sports bra covering maybe a third of your perfect tits. And another thing, I'm biologically programmed to stare at boobs, okay? It's in my DNA to scan for supple, life-giving breasts. And it's not a personal thing. It's not about me. It's about my potential future offspring, okay? So really, it's a selfless act. I'm paying it forward. And one last thing, okay? If all that isn't enough, I spent the best 18 months of my life sucking on those things for my very sustenance, okay? So don't you think that maybe in the recesses of my mind that I look at breasts and I think of a safe haven, that they're objects of love and caring, representing a time in my life when days were easy, and that maybe I saw all of that in your beautiful breasts?
I don't know what to say. That was actually logical and somehow sweet. Do you want to go get coffee or something?
You know?
Oh, that got cut short. The answer was what?
No.
Yes. So, a little bit about the male-female dynamic and some of the things that are not easy to talk about and not easy to acknowledge. In a potential romantic connection, whether heterosexual or gay, there are basically three types of power: veto power, original choice power, and genetic celebrity power. Genetic celebrity's power's primary usefulness is to attract the largest number of people. Genetic celebrity power is basically when a woman or a man is extremely beautiful. They're so beautiful that they can have people follow them around on campus, just not knowing anything about them, just because they're beautiful. It's almost impossible for a man to be a genetic celebrity. Only when women follow men around, it's because not just they are good looking, but because he's the football player, because he's a student body president, or he has something in addition to his looks to merit him being followed around. He's some type of celebrity. Women can be followed around, as every guy here who's heterosexual knows, merely because she is beautiful, making her a genetic celebrity. Genetic celebrity's power's primary usefulness is to attract the largest possible number of men so she can have the equivalent of original choice power without risking rejection. What's original choice power? Original choice power is the power that many women don't take advantage of. When we train men to take their original choice about which women we are interested in, the result of that is men get original choice power. That is the power to sort of do the original choice, and women often do veto power. The journey from eye contact to intercourse is a lot different for the woman who is hooking up for a night versus marriage for children. When the idea is marriage and children, a woman is happiest if 9 conditions are met prior to intercourse. For guys to want sex, they still need only 1 condition to be met: sexual attraction. A study of 1,000 young men and women, though, found that when a man and a woman are having a relationship not do well, boys' mental health is more negatively affected than girls' mental health is. It's just that boys pretend not to have it be such a problem. This is getting a little disjointed because I'm skipping things here because of the challenge of the time and not wanting to keep you long. So I'm going to move really toward the end, and if you're interested in pursuing more with me around the issue of sex, I will come back to dealing with that issue in greater depth. I want to end by saying that these are some of the concrete causes and solutions to a boy crisis. However, if we succeed in launching boys who have failed to launch, but just launch them into becoming somebody that their parents want them to be, then we really haven't accomplished much. We've squandered the opportunity to free our sons to choose in the way the women's movement helped free our daughters to choose. If we do free our sons to choose who they want to be, the good news, this implies the end of men as human doings and the beginning of men as human beings. That is the evolutionary shift. That is the potential good news that is available to us for pursuit in dealing with the boy crisis. The bad news is that we're talking about a journey that can't begin until we understand the genetic heritage of boys, that virtually every society that survived did so by preparing its sons to be disposable. In war and in work, disposability was sold to boys as a sense of purpose with the gift of legacy, the legacy of leaving his children with a life better than his life, the exact same legacy that a mother hoped to leave her children. But today, as our sons are surrounded by families whose dads are disposable, do they fear a future of potential disposability as a dad, as opposed to a legacy of a dad? Do they sense a loss of legacy and a loss of purpose? And is it possible, we have to ask this crucial question, is it possible there could be an unconscious wisdom in our sons' failure to launch? We cannot reinvent the beginning of the journey for boys, without also reinventing the journey's destination, manhood. To reinvent the male journey requires asking some amazing questions, such as, what type of sons do we want our sons to become? But this doesn't need to be the type of question that was asked in the past, which is, what type of sons do we want our sons to become? It needs to be a discussion with our sons, not of our sons. As a discussion with our sons, our first input as an adult is sharing the trade-offs of becoming a killer protector, for example, joining the military or making a killing on Wall Street or Bay Street, or becoming a nurturer connector, such as a full-time dad. Our sons' response is sharing the trade-offs that motivate them. The second adult input is requiring boys to develop postponed gratification. In my study of boys and families, I find that there's no single characteristic more important than postponed gratification to allow somebody to succeed at whatever motivates them. The best thing a parent can do to nourish postponed gratification is not set boundaries, but to enforce the boundaries one sets. A boundary set that isn't a boundary enforced makes a child feel that it can manipulate a parent. It's usually a gift of father involvement, but it can also become a gift of mother involvement as well. The key to freeing our sons to choose is honoring both the new male and the traditional male, which means developing new rites of passage to honor both boys who seek personal fulfillment and boys who seek to sacrifice for a noble cause. Adults can't motivate our sons to a new journey without re-examining the most important re-examination, our own adult motivations for the old journey. For example, if we really want healthy sons, but we also need and praise our sons for making a killing in Bay Street or Wall Street, how do we challenge our unconscious investment in our sons' disposability? And if our sons are not socialized to be disposable, where do we get our soldiers from? Where do we get our firefighters from? Those are just two of many examples of our investment in male disposability. These are the questions that every living human must now begin to discuss to blaze a trail from failure to launch to mission accomplished, to navigate the first journey of boys from human doings to human beings. Just as the women's movement that I was so deeply involved with redefined women and expanded our daughters' future, we must now redefine men and expand our sons' future, thus preparing our sons to become the men that our daughters will be proud to love. Thank you. Thank you for your enormous listening skills. Yes.
I know we had questions in the very beginning, but the whole purpose of tonight's event was to listen to what Warren Farrell had to say, and I'm sure you still have questions. If Warren, if you're willing to stick around, both Hartley and I will address and we'll start the question and answer period right now. No. Okay. All right.
Sorry, I asked you to do that myself because one of the things that I want to communicate to people is that there aren't people that have all the answers. That if we're really going to get boys actively growing and involving, we have to have a different thing than a hierarchical system that says people at the top have the answers, people who are not at the top don't have the answers. So the way I'd like to sort of play that out here is when you have a question or want to make a comment, either one is fine. I'll be asking I'll ask you to say your name so I can speak to you as a person. But then I'm going to ask another person or two to comment or make a comment or your perspective on that from your life experience. So the group here will gain from more than just me. You'll get a sense of the community of contributions. I will then add my contribution as well so that I don't escape from the process of answering questions. But I'll ask you to say your name. And do we have a microphone so that we can hear him as well as we can hear me? We do? Okay. Would you say your name? Sure, absolutely. Say your name.
Dan Smith.
Dan, right.
Yeah. If I can just ask, I'm a reporter from the varsity. If we can talk afterwards, I just wanted to have a bit of a conversation.
Absolutely. The answer is yes. I will stay here.
Just wanted me to say.
Yes, absolutely, Dan. Sure thing. Say your name. Yes. Sorry. Brad, would you stand up, Brad?
Sure. I guess I'm just wondering, occasionally I hear arguments on behalf of feminists to the effect that patriarchy hurts men too. And they'll echo a lot of the things you've said here. And I guess I'm just wondering how much of your views do you think are in fact compatible with certain formulations of feminism and how much of it is going to result in a criticism of feminism?
Great. Is your name Brad Corbett?
Brad Schubert.
Oh, Schubert. Okay, great. Brad, the question is how many of my arguments are compatible with feminism? Is that the core of the question?
Essentially.
Yes, okay. Anybody wants to you've heard some of my perspectives tonight from here. What is compatible, what is not compatible with feminism from your perspective? And then I'll add my perspective as well. Faith, would you stand up and give your perspective?
I think that one thing that really differs from your perspective is, and the feminist perspective, is modern feminism, like what's happening currently, is really trying to step away from the essentialist perspective of men and women and see everything as being socially constructed, whereas your argument for the biological reasons for the way men and women behave differently. And I think that a lot of the feminists who are kind of who have probably the most legitimate things to say are arguing that you need to be addressing people as a whole and then looking at the intersectionality of various factors instead of separating it into men and women and then organizing them individually by their various associations.
Great, very good. Did you get what Faith said? Could you hear Faith, or should I repeat it? You heard it? Okay, very good. Thank you, Faith. Excellent points, and obviously well scored. We're going to stay with the original question that Brad asked. Are you with that question? Okay. Say your name, and could you stand up?
It's Paul. I just wonder whether feminism at its core was created to address inequality, and whether what Warren is talking about is addressing inequality, and then what we're all looking for really is to be treated as equals. We don't want women to be more than men or men to be more than women. We're just all looking to be respected and to address any inequalities that we can identify.
One more comment. Thank you very much. One more comment, and then I'll add my perspective on that. Yes, relation to the feminism issue. And say your name?
Ryan.
Right.
Yeah, I think one of the things you have as a problem is taking a look at social movements like feminism, because it's evolved considerably from the way that feminism was in the 60s and before to what it is now. In the 60s and before, yeah, feminism was much more of an equal opportunity, equal capability of doing things, equal respect, those sort of things. Then feminism now seems to have become the third and fourth ways, much more into redefining themselves as a separate entity as opposed to necessarily equality. So part of it is what Warren does, which is taking a look at the core and versus the other thing. The one thing that I have a bit of a problem with, and pardon me, my background is statistics, I take a look at the people that I know, and whether they're male or female, there's much more difference between the people that have nothing to do with gender. Okay? I'm a mathematician by background. There's lots of women who are actually extremely good mathematicians. They say that women don't get the spatial perceptions as well as men. But I'll tell you, there's some women who are damn good at it. Okay? And the thing is, maybe on average, but we have a really hard time having a society constructed on averages, whether it's basically on equality or a separation on any sort of basis, because individuals have much more variation than any of these other classifications.
Yes, very good. Okay, so let's see my perspective on this. I would say the core issue that I've come to understand over the years is that, historically speaking, I don't believe, the reason I wrote The Myth of Male Power was because I began to understand that we really shouldn't have been doing a feminist movement saying that women were oppressed, or a masculinist response saying that men were oppressed. What I came to understand is that what we really needed was a gender transition movement, a transition from the rigid gender roles of the past to more flexible gender roles for the future. And that involved both. I came to understand that my father, or I'd take a cab, for example, in New York City with Gloria Steinem to a radio show, and the cab driver would recognize Gloria and say, you're that woman who's involved with the feminist stuff, aren't you? And Gloria would say yes, and he'd say, well, and they'd say, well, what are you going to talk about? And I'd say, well, men and having all the power. And the cab driver would hesitate for a little while. He'd say, could I say something? And we'd say, oh, yeah, sure, go ahead. And so the cab driver would say, well, I work about 70 hours a week as a cab driver. I think the average cab driver around me works about the same amount as I have. Do you think I do that so I earn more than my wife? Do you think that's probably true? Yeah, exactly. So do you think I have more power? I don't think I have more power. I think every hour I work, I take away from what I really want to do, which is to be with the kids I'm working for. And that's, to me, not power. So I don't know, you guys, I'm pretty crazy, but I know you'll get all the publicity, and it just got me thinking, what is power? Power is about feeling, we've trained our sons to feel obligated to earn money that someone else spends while we die sooner. As I mentioned that before, that's not power. And so I began to understand, what is power? Power is control over one's life. Now, what I just mentioned about earning money, that is a type of power. That's called influence power. It's status power. It's respect power. But if we look at that from the perspective that I looked at before, we can also look at that as social bribes to keep boys to be disposable, to take risks that they don't want to risk. And one of the reasons why so many boys are having a failure to launch is they don't sense where they can go that they want to go to. And that's a great opportunity, because that's a deep question. Where do we want to go? And so the difference between myself and the feminist movement, Faith, is that I'm looking at those issues. The feminist movement is not looking at those issues. In relation to the slice that you were talking about, Faith, about looking at whole people rather than just as males and females, what we will find in the future is two things that will appear contradiction, but they're actually a paradox. Brain science, neuroscience, will increasingly teach us that there are differences between men and women that go much deeper than we have ever known. That is what we are learning if you read any good neuroscience text that doesn't have an agenda with it. At the same time, the opposite is being learned, or so it appears, which is that neuroscience, neuroplasticity research is teaching us that we have the ability to adapt to a much greater degree, much more quickly than Darwin ever knew. That is, so here's the two way that I look at male-female with all its limitations. That men and women are very fundamentally different, yes, but we have one difference that runs deeper than male-female differences, and that is the ability to adapt to what is functional. The people who survive adapt. And so what the question that we need to look at is the future and what is functional for boys and what is functional for girls. The women's movement has done a much better job at helping females adapt to a world of work or a world of home and having the options to do either one. They did a very good job selling women on work as being power, and therefore many women bought that even as they got stressed, because for many women, work feels like power and feels empowering. For other women, they'd rather be home with their children. That feels more empowering. Other women would feel like they want to do some combination of both. But in the process of doing that, helping women adapt so effectively, we haven't put that same emphasis on men and boys adapting to a world where, as I mentioned before, the workplace in the old days used to be about manufacturing, about construction, about muscle to a larger degree, and the workplace in the future is not going to be predominantly about muscle. Boys have to learn how to adapt to mental. They learn how to, they need to, their ADHD to a much greater degree, and the school system can help them by being boy-friendly, and all boys' schools can be helpful if they're run well, and they're terrible if they're run badly. But so we have to experiment with how boys can adapt that is functional for them. The question of the future has to be not what is male and female only, the value of knowing what is inherently male and what is inherently female. The primary value of that is compassion. When you know that it takes men longer to do certain things and they're more likely to respond to emergencies, and that the testosterone goes up quickly in terms of emergencies, and that women need to not have problems solved but to be able to talk about the problem, and that a man learns to shut his mouth and listen and be there for her while she's processing the problem and not solve it for her. Those are male-female differences that is very functional to know, because when you know them, you learn how to deal with more love and compassion and less judgment. So men are from Mars, women are from Venus. The value of that is saying that when I go to a different culture, when I come here to Canada, there are things that I just enjoy the differences. I don't judge the differences. If I came to Canada and I started saying, these 14 things are different than they are in the United States, you ought to change and be like me, I'd be arrogant, self-righteous, and not very easy to get along with, and I'd be mostly wrong. And so that's the value of the understanding the differences, but it's also understanding that the differences are not where we reside. We reside by asking ourselves, what are things that are functional for the future? So thank you for your good insights on that. I hope I've answered that question. New question, new topic. Yes, say your name.
My name is John.
John.
I just wanted to mention something based on your statistic back many slides. I'm a son of a single mother, and you brought up that there are many children now that are born out of marriage.
I'm sorry, John, a little louder.
There are many children now born out of marriages.
Yes.
I think that while that is important, more important than that is all 18 years of childhood. What figures do they have? Like, just because they were born out of marriage, yes, it's the unspoken default that children end up in the custody of the mother, right? That we didn't say it, but that's obviously the case. I just want to know if there's any statistics on like how often children have a father for all 18 years of their childhood, and how often they have a
Yes, it's very good. Yes, absolutely. Sure. First of all, yes. So you have two big pieces of data here. One is the women under 30, 53% of them having children out of wedlock. That correlates with very highly with children having fathers minimally involved or children not having fathers involved at all. Why is that? Frequently, when a woman has a child out of wedlock, she doesn't have a lot of respect for the man that she had the child with. He's often in failure to launch mode. He's often not as successful as her, or she and he don't get along anymore. So she's often getting a little bit on a few years older, where she's decided that she wants to raise a child, so she has that child in that way. So the problem is not having the child out of wedlock per se. The problem is the lack of father involvement that usually comes along with that. The single most significant thing that keeps fathers from not being involved is either after a divorce, the mother says she doesn't want the father to be involved for whatever reason, so we have fathers' rights movements that are fighting for the right to be involved, and so that's a really major problem. So we have the problem after divorce, where fathers get disconnected from the children. And we have the problem of the father never being connected from the children to begin with. In those, now what percentage of children are which way? About a third of children at any given point in time do not have fathers involved with their family at any given point in time. But about 2/3 of children at some point during their life do have both parents involved. And that's going down very quickly. So if you look at more recent data, that may be a little bit lower than that. One of the big reasons why fathers don't always remain involved is if they feel too gate kept, meaning that if the mother is saying, when you have the child, during your time, you make sure you don't leave the child alone on the playground without being with the child at the playground. Make sure that the child does this way and not that way. And the father begins to feel like a babysitter. And so when his perspectives, his values are not valued well, the father tends to become uninvolved in the process. Fathers and mothers do very different things with children. The fathers are far more likely to encourage children to do things that are outside of their children's comfort zone. They're far more likely to encourage risks. They're far more likely to roughhouse. They're far more likely to enforce boundaries, not set boundaries. They're far more likely to play with the children. They turn everything, as a rule, many fathers turn everything into a game. And the good news is that by turning things into a game, they build up a reservoir of goodwill from which they can leverage good boundary enforcement. Not every father does this way, but this is oftentimes not appreciated by a mother. So, for example, a father, when the child is, let's say, in a divorce, and the child is visiting during the weekend, and the father says, "Okay, go to the playground. Be careful there." And so the father might take the child to the playground, leave the child at the playground, come home and watch an ice hockey match, and then the child, let's say, gets into a fight at the playground. And the mother, and then on Sunday goes home to the mother, and the mother says, "How did you get into that fight? What happened?" "Oh, I got into a fight at the playground." "Well, where was Dad?" "He was home watching the ice hockey game." "I see." And so what does the mother conclude? Father cares more about ice hockey than my son. But because fathers don't articulate their perspective until you really ask and talk with them, you don't get from the father the perspective that if my son gets into a fight in the playground, I'd like to know about it when he comes home, talk with him about it. He's much more likely to learn a great deal by getting into a fight and then avoiding a fight, that he will be having me protect him from that fight to begin with. I'd rather have him get into a fight when he's young, when I'm here to protect him and guide him, than be protected from a fight until he gets older and he graduates. Now I'm looking around at the audience here, I'm seeing a lot of guys nod their head yes. I'm not seeing a single woman nod her head yes. And so, and it's not because men are right or women are wrong or vice versa, it's because these are different values, different internal thinkings. The problem is with guys, we haven't thought this through, we don't articulate this, so women can't hear what men don't say. And fathers don't go into psychology sections of bookstores and read about this and articulate this to their wives. So women often feel like they want the child primarily after divorce because they are the better parent. Because there isn't a good male-female dialogue about the checks and balances that good parenting needs. We only have outcome data that only a few people are aware of, that children with a significant amount of father involvement have much more empathy. Empathy. Now, how in the world do children with a lot of father involvement get, for example, more empathy? Aren't women in general more empathetic than men? I would probably vote yes on that issue. Maybe not on every level, but in many levels. And so if that's the case, how do the children have more empathy the more involvement with father they have? And the reason is that empathy doesn't come from being empathized. When you're empathized with, you learn to focus on yourself. When everybody's thinking about what you need and what your feelings are and how you are hurt, you become self-centered. You become narcissistic. You become non-empathetic very frequently. Empathy often comes from, like, say, a father and a child wrestling, and the father saying, you can use leverage, you can fake me out with eye contact, but if you poke me in the eyes or pull my hair or kick me in the groin, there'll be no more wrestling tonight. And then the child does one of those things, and the father says, okay, no more wrestling tonight. The father who enforces the boundaries of no more wrestling tonight teaches that child, daughter or son, to think about some feelings besides the child's need or desire to win as a wrestler. The child who doesn't get those boundaries enforced starts thinking, let me see how much I can get away with by poking, pulling in order to win. When a mother and father are divorced, very typically a mom will say, sweetie, you can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas. What will a dad say? He'll say exactly the same thing. You can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas. The difference is that when mom says it, and then the child says, I've had a few more peas, can I have my ice cream now? Mom tends to think to herself, you know, I'm the only mom here, I've a divorce, I feel a little bit guilty, am I going to make a huge issue out of a few peas? I don't think so. It would be insensitive for me to do so. So the mom is more likely to say, okay, you've had a few peas, now you can have your ice cream. The dad is more likely to say, what? Excuse me, we have a deal here. The deal here is you can either not have any peas and get your and get no ice cream, or you can have all your peas like we made the deal for and get the ice cream. And the child, and here's the key issue here, the child with the mom is learning, I can always manipulate a better deal. And if mom articulates any of her vulnerabilities, like I feel a little bit guilty after divorce, the child goes for that feeling that she or he can manipulate. So the child doesn't learn how to focus attention on what she or he needs to focus attention on. The child begins to get attention deficit disorder. So children raised primarily by moms are twice as likely to have attention deficit disorder as children raised primarily by dads. Because watch what the dad is doing. By him saying you can't have your ice cream until you finish your peas, he's making it worthwhile for the child to focus on finishing those peas, that is, focus on the activity it needs to focus on in order to get the reward. What the child is learning from the dad is that postponed gratification pays. What the child's learning from the mom is that postponed gratification doesn't pay. I can win the ice cream without focusing for very long. I can focus on manipulation rather than on finishing the deed. Postponed gratification, I mentioned before, is the single most important skill set to do that. So knowing these differences are very helpful. But can women learn to do that boundary enforcement? They absolutely can. Is it harder for women to do that? As a rule, usually, because women have such a protector instinct and the empathy, oftentimes in the feelings of the sensitivities of that child about the divorce or having failed in school or something else that went wrong in school, are likely to be very present in the mom's psyche. So it's valuable for the father to understand that that difference is there, because it increases the father's empathy for the mother and what she's struggling with and how hard a difference. For the father, that comes natural. Tough love comes much more natural for most dads. So it's important for moms and dads to understand their differences, but it's also important for moms and dads to realize that raising children is like running a government. You better dare, if you appreciate conservatives and liberals as checks and balances, and when you have both, you run a better government. With raising children, when you have the father input and the mother input, and you keep both involved, and instead of saying, you're wrong, mom, you're wrong, dad, you appreciate the tension is really checks and balances. And so rather than focusing on the tension, and we're terrible, we're not worthy of each other, we shouldn't be with each other, we want something different, we say, I really appreciate what you bring that's different from what I bring. I see how difficult it is for you to think differently about that. Let's talk that through and communicate that through and learn to both contribute to that. When we do that, we are bringing to our sons and our daughters a view that when parents disagree, they can resolve that rather than divorce. Phew, that was a big answer for you. Thank you. Another question, and I was going to let somebody else make a comment before that, but go ahead. Say your name.
My name is Sid. I have a very brief comment and a question. First of all, the comment is today is considered Men's International Day all over the world.
Oh, is that right?
November 16th.
Wow.
The second thing is, the third world, you find, compared to the first world, the dynamics between the genders there and here. Do you find it's significant difference? Like, is there real oppression of women in the third world as compared to here, or is just the dynamic different?
Yes. So the question is the dynamic different between countries that are more industrialized, or what is often called first world countries, and developing countries that are sort of not usually industrialized? And is there more also oppression of women in more third world or developing countries? Anybody have any comments on that? And then I'll add my perspective to that as well. And then we'll probably bring it to a close. Yes. Say your name. Robin?
Robin.
Oh, Robin. Sorry about that, Robin.
This is not so my opinion, but I've heard some kind of perspective on this from Thomas Sowell. He felt that any government that made people more dependent on it, just like the introduction of welfare, it kind of emasculated men, made them less the provider for the family. So that if they were to leave their families, they would have fatherless families. The family would always rely on the government. So men felt less responsibility towards their family for that reason. So I've only heard that. I haven't actually looked into it myself, but that was the perspective I heard.
I'm missing some part of the context there, Robin. Are you saying that's true in developing countries or developed?
In a country that have welfare as an option,
Uh-huh.
so like some kind of dependence on government.
Oh, I see. Right.
And it's, I think Thomas Sowell was saying that about the black community in particular,
Mm-hmm.
but that was the 70s that he said that.
Yes,
And
yes.
that's just one perspective I've heard from that.
Mhm. Good. Thank you, Robin. Very good. Anybody else have any thoughts about this issue of, is there more oppression? Is it Matt? Right. Matt, speak. Stand up, please.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, something that I noticed through different organizations that we travel. It is true in a lot of countries that are still developing, there is a bit of, sometimes you might see a bit of inequality in terms of gender. Sometimes women in some places do not get as much right as men. That is true. What you usually see is that in a lot of these countries, the concept that you spoke about earlier, which is, back in the 1900s, where you have like women being seen different than a man, and the man is actually there to protect, and provide and, you know, to be the one who leads and who wins the race. That is still happening in some countries that have not yet moved from that environment to actually be more seeing, you know, men and women as equal. So that's a cultural aspect. Sometimes it's a religious aspect. Sometimes it's just the way how the political structure of that country is. So that's really what the issue is. It's not something that has to do with today or whether that country has more money or less money or has more industry or less industry. It's just the fact that those countries haven't gone through a bunch of problems that they have already, or haven't come through a bunch of financial, political burden to actually come to resolve these issues of having that traditional, old school view of men and women relationships and how they interact.
Very nice explanation, Matt. Say your name?
Yeah, David.
David?
I think, in my opinion, that in a lot of third world countries, women do not have fair rights. And I'm not sure if you consider Saudi Arabia a third world country, but they clearly don't have rights there. And I also notice that when I look in the news and I see photos of a lot of these less developed countries, that it seems to me that there are only men in the pictures. It's like 99% men. So I don't know, it seems to me that would indicate in a lot of countries like that, they don't have the same type of laws that we have in the developed countries. I think in developed countries, the pendulum has swung probably one way where it's caused trouble for boys. But in those countries, I think that they still have to get up to the level where there's equality between men and women, and I don't think there is in those countries.
Last comment on that. Say your name.
My name's Christina.
Christina, would you stand up so it's easier to project?
Really? It's not only those countries, it's the people that come here from those countries. And I believe there's a case in court right now of a man who killed his wife because they came to this country, she got a job, she was taking care of the family, and he just felt so emasculated that he took her out. And it's a problem because the balance went so far so quickly for a lot of these people that come from those countries to here that they don't know how to handle it, and it breaks down the family, I think, in worse ways than we are used to here in North America.
Yes.
I just wanted to add something to that. I mean, I don't know if it's a male-woman issue from people from other countries, because I think there was that case where that lady was involved with apparently pushing her kids into the canal. And that both men and women can be quite evil. That's my opinion. It's not relegated to either men are just evil or women are evil. They both can be evil. It's possible for both genders.
Yes. Okay, this is one of the toughest questions because my personal values are, I wouldn't have been involved with the feminist movement from the very early days if I didn't have a very strong propensity to wanting women to be strong. I married a woman who was making over $1 million a year, not making 50 cents an hour when I married her, but making $1 million a year in her job. So I tend to be attracted to women who have a lot of competence and that type of thing. And I feel I know how to support them to do well. But so that's my value system. I have found that when I take my value system to other cultures without really understanding the culture, I have a tendency that I have a job to do first, which is to listen and see what is the best intent of that culture. What's their history? How did they get set up that way? What was their rationale? And for the most part, what I see as the rationale of developing countries is in fact very significant than what evolved in countries that are industrialized. So once a country gets industrialized, there's a tendency for enough of survival that the oppressor is not men. That the oppressor was the need is not really an oppressor. The oppressing factor in almost all the world until post-World War II is the fear of not surviving. And industrialized countries basically solved enough of that fear for a percentage of the population that percentage of the population in industrialized countries could be free from traditional roles and focus more not on survival, but in a Maslow type of sense, focus more on fulfillment and other things that they really wanted. So then men and women became free. Ideally, men became free to do things that earned less money, because the more money you feel you need to earn, the more you do something that is less fulfilling. That is, as a rule, the more fulfilling a job is, the less it pays. Why does a more fulfilling job pay less? Because the more fulfilling it is, the more people want to do it. The more people want to do it, the greater the supply in relation to the demand, therefore the lower the pay of the job. Hence, lots of jobs that we all love to do pay very minimally. But when a parent needed to, when a parent needs to support children, in the 1900s, that was 9 or 10 children on average. You don't make a calculation to be an artist. For the first 10 years of my writing books, my father would always say, okay, Warren, I guess you still have to write this other book, but if it fails, you can always get a job. And he always, until I really started making significant money from my books, he had nothing but fear for me, not contempt for me, but fear for me that I wouldn't adequately be able to take care of my family in the way I wanted to. So the old roles were what men and women did to survive. And so men had rights outside of the home, women had rights inside of the home. In traditional cultures, for the most part, women are more the enforcers of traditions than males are. Both sexes are, but the children learn from their mothers more than their fathers. Do this, this is the way to do, this is the way to behave, these are the rules, these are the things. Those are rules that emanate not from the father oppressing the mother, but from that culture interpreting the way to survive by that division of labor. To evolve from that is a complex process, and then when you do evolve from that, usually it happens the way it happened in the United States. The way it happened in the United States and Canada is that who were the women that were the first to be free? Were they poor women or were they wealthier women? Who were the women that were the first to be free? Poor women or wealthier women? The wealthier women. Were they usually married to men who were successful or unsuccessful?
Successful men.
They were usually wealthier women married to successful men. So they married men who made enough money to free the women to go to psychologists to discover who they wanted to be. Who they wanted to be and who they wanted to be related to was oftentimes men who were different from the men they had married because they chose the men they had married based on their ability to earn money. The capacity to earn good money gives you skills at earning money that teaches you how to focus on becoming successful at work, and they're the opposite of the skill sets that are needed to become successful in love. And so the women went to the psychologist, and the psychologist said, yes, you're right. The man should be doing this more, there should be more relationship stuff, more contact stuff, more communication stuff. But she had married a man, selected a man, based on his ability to communicate. She married a man based on his ability to earn good money. So she became very unhappy with this man. And she had affairs with people like me who were going out there talking about, relationships and love and stuff like that, because I was sort of in touch with my feelings. And so, but what she really wanted was not somebody predominantly like me, unless I was also succeeding. But she wanted somebody that was really, I'm a little bit joking about that last issue, but it was more fun to say it. And so that's what evolved in most industrialized countries. What the feminist movement did that was great is it sold women's opportunity to be successful and empowered based on focusing on work, but it made men seem like we had designed a system that worked only for men and not for women, because it defined power as earning money, as opposed to recognizing that earning money was frequently about the power that we forfeit. That is, when you earn money, you're working for somebody else. That's about the power that you forfeit. If you redefine power as control over your own life, earning money is forfeiting power, because it's often forfeiting control over your own life. But pay is paradoxical. Pay is about the power we forfeit to get the power of pay. We forfeit the power to control our own life by working for somebody else, but we get the power to contribute money to the people in our life that we love. And that's the paradox that the feminist movement did not understand and articulate, and I don't blame the feminist movement because nobody articulated it. I only blame that when I did articulate it, that people that weren't able or willing to hear that, rather than say, tell me more and inquire. So we need, for the future, inquiries and compassion, both for what the other sexes have as differences, and for the tremendous opportunities to free our sons to become human beings rather than human doings. We have a crisis that we need to see the depth and the dimension and the breadth of, see the causes of, have the courage to solve, both among educators, among parents, and among policymakers, from everything from the flates in the environment to our ability to communicate and hear personal criticism without becoming defensive. When we put those solutions together, we'll have what we really all want, and what we all have in common is a deep desire for love. Thanks.
Everybody, we need help. This event was supposed to be something on a greater scale, but obviously with the problems we had. So I'm asking, volunteer, donate, anything. But on behalf of the Canadian Association for Equality, I thank Mr. Farrell.
I'll wait around here, so if anyone wants to talk to me, I'll be happy to answer questions more in depth.